Sure. So yeah, I'm a big like forward thinking longevity thing. I'm a bit of a purist, so I'll take that for what it is. But I want to, know my local farmer rancher, eat real food, be somewhat ancestral in that regard. But I want to eat in a way that I'm excited about eating over the next 50, 60, 70 years. And I feel like if you look through life and the decisions you make through that lens, that definitely points you on a narrower path, but a better path, I would argue.
Yeah, and for me, like right now, with eating I'm no stranger to eating like rice. Again, even on my lower carb protocols, I've eaten rice, I've eaten potatoes. I've talked about this many times before. I used to actually just eat potatoes usually instead of rice just because it was easier to eat less potatoes. And rice, for me, it's easy for just like to take out, cups and cups of rice. But, I can picture doing this diet for a long time, or at least utilizing it intermittently alongside some other protocols. I wouldn't be surprised if like in the wintertime, I just want more fat. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I wouldn't be surprised if in the wintertime I'm like, maybe I'll just do, more of like a keto style diet or a lower carb diet and just bring the fats up for a little while. I mean, why not, right? I think you think about what bodybuilders do. And again, I don't think, we should just like follow bodybuilders, but I think that bodybuilders have created a cool path for us, because I do think that between the ages of, maybe 15 to like 60 almost, I think we should try to put some muscle mass on, or at least hold muscle mass, find a nice amount of muscle mass to hold on to and either keep it or try to continue to gain some muscle mass. And, when I think about that and I think about, the different styles of diet that I've utilized, all of them can work, towards, holding on to muscle mass, building muscle mass. I just always felt a little bit more comfortable when it came to gaining strength and when it came to gaining muscle mass, eating a little bit more carbohydrate.
Yeah.
That's been my, own experience with that, and like almost like hydrating the muscles with the carbohydrates and stuff. And we have to keep in mind, again, like, what are we talking about here? So like, we're talking about glucose, right? So just because I'm mentioning carbohydrates, I'm talking about dietary carbohydrates. It doesn't mean that because you do your style of diet where you're doing a ketogenic diet and you're not consuming carbohydrate, you still have glucose. And you might have the same amount of glucose. That's what gets weird about this stuff, is like, you might have the same amount of glucose running through your bloodstream as somebody that follows a diet that has higher carbohydrate or even high carbohydrate. But what I feel personally is and I don't know this for sure, but I feel like that when I eat carbohydrates, dietary carbohydrates, I feel as if those carbohydrates, when they break down into glucose, I feel like they're in my muscle tissue. Whereas when I've done keto, I feel like somebody kind of sucked the glucose out of my muscle tissue. I just didn't feel like it was still there the same way. And I would feel like a little empty. It wasn't like I couldn't get a pump. It wasn't like I couldn't have a good workout. It just, in comparison to me having carbohydrate and being able to fill the muscle tissue up with sodium, potassium, and all the different things that, at least what I believe glucose can help deliver to the muscle tissues, it just didn't feel like the same thing. And again, I don't have any proof or evidence that's the case or not the case, but it's just a feeling that I've had.
Yeah, I mean, there's been studies, like the faster studies show that you're able to repair, replenish, and replete muscle glycogen independent of carbohydrate consumption once deeply fat adapted. And people will argue all day long, what is the length of time necessary for depth of fat adaptation? And I've always said, 6 months. Because like when you go from a carbohydrate-based diet or higher carb diet, and then you go keto, you're going to feel pretty flat for the first several weeks, possibly several months. And a lot of people, most people, don't really have the staying power to stick with it, 6 months strictly to be able to have an accurate comparison. I mean, I used to eat all the carbohydrates. I know what I felt like then. I know the vascularity I had. And I've got more vascularity and fullness on stage now when I'm dialed in for a show than I did back then. But I've been doing this strictly now for 10 years. You know, do I think you need to be doing it strictly for 10 years in order to have all those metabolic pathways in place? Probably not. Nobody would do it if that was the case. But it is one of those things where I think it gets better the longer you do it. And that you're no longer sacrificing that fullness once that length of adaptation has been met.
What do you think about like when you start to pull body fat off of your body, you burn fat. Do you think that that fat is a similar nutrient as compared to dietary fat?
Similar. I mean, when you're burning fat, whether it's dietary or, adipose tissue, like you can create ketones. People can take exogenous ketones now. You can have those that cross the blood-brain barrier to provide cognitive enhancement. But from a cellular standpoint, I mean, how that interacts with the body is going to be pretty similar. From an energy standpoint, if I'm taking in, I feel like there's a point of diminishing returns. Like if I'm ever consuming just like a massive bolus of energy, whether it's, for my case, it's going to be fat and protein. But if I'm taking in too much fuel, I almost start to feel lethargic. So that's kind of defeating the purpose there. But like if I'm in an extended fast or if I'm super depleted or if I'm low body fat, I notice a profound benefit from a bolus day of, higher dietary fat to provide that influx.
Yeah, I just like super curious about all this stuff. Like if it seems like a calorie surplus isn't really, it seems like a calorie surplus is not necessarily healthy for us, but it's not necessarily healthy for us over like a long period of time.
Yeah.
So again, like kind of looking at what bodybuilders do, it's like, well, a caloric deficit also isn't really that healthy either.
But
for
sure.
Depends, it's context dependent, right? Like if you have 50 pounds to lose, well, then a caloric deficit sounds like it's going to be one of the healthier choices you can make because you have to address weight loss at some point. And then a caloric surplus can be something that could be great for some people, especially people that are just very thin or somebody that has been dieting for a long time to start to bring their calories back up. And that's what I was going to say earlier, and I kind of lost my point, was that bodybuilders, they build and they lose, they build and they lose, they build and they lose. And what they're trying to do over time is have their muscle mass just creeping up slowly. And whether it's a guy that's enhanced or a guy that's natural, it's going to be super slow anyway. Because what people don't realize about the guy that's enhanced, the guy that is enhanced, he's enhanced and now he's at this higher level. But just because he's enhanced, he doesn't just go with his muscle mass. He goes almost just as slow as the other guy. Now, he's got different options. He might be able to change drugs. He might be able to do a little bit more here and there. But in the end, it's actually the same thing. We're just talking about somebody that's 20, 30 pounds heavier than the person that's natural. But one of the reasons why I think it's a good idea to look at what bodybuilders do is because they do put that muscle mass on and they do lose that fat. They put the muscle mass on and they do lose. So they may they'll acquire more muscle mass and they'll acquire more fat. And then they'll come back down the other side and they'll lose fat and they'll try to hold on to as much muscle as they can. And if they do it correctly over time, they will have created a situation where they are kind of continually increasing their muscle mass. Maybe it's just ever so slowly increasing their muscle mass and continuing to bring that body fat level down and just create a body that's just maybe operates at a little bit higher metabolic rate because they're mainly just muscle tissue at some point.
Yeah, I think regardless of the diet people are following, there's extreme health benefits from a metabolic standpoint to have periods of time when you're in a deficit, periods of time where you're in a surplus, always within a healthy range. Because like end of a competition prep for me, I mean, that was not healthy for that very finite period of time. But modulating between being in a surplus, being in a deficit is super advantageous metabolically speaking. And it takes time to build legitimate skeletal muscle tissue. So it stands to reason that you should spend more time in a surplus than in a deficit. So I feel like, like a 3-to-1 ratio or something of that nature. But if everybody did that, whether they were ever planning to compete as a bodybuilder or not, would benefit from it metabolically speaking, for sure.
It's really interesting because I bet your body is trying to do that anyway.
Yeah.
Just like your body intuitively is trying to eat less at certain times of the year, and at certain times of the year or just certain days, you're just like more hungry or less hungry. It seems like the body wants to do it. And it's interesting to have it scheduled. Oh, for these 3 months, I'm going to increase my calories for a little while. It seems to make a lot of sense. That would make you feel really good. And then for a period of time, you're going to lower your calories. And for me, it's been kind of annoying because I've been on this weight loss mission for so long. I haven't had an opportunity to come up for air because I mean, I've done so a little bit throughout the years because it's coming down from 330, that was 15 years ago. So I have kind of staggered it, over time. But yeah, this last dip down to 200 has been a real bitch. And then because I added the carbohydrates back in, and because of the way I'm able to work out right now, I'm able to lift heavier. I'm able to add more volume. So it's man, it's going to get harder and harder to get down to that 200-pound mark. I'm still about 15 pounds off.